So I'll switch to English because as far as I know the next presentation will be done in English. So our next speaker is Usha Udaar from the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. And the title of the talk is Ergativity, a descriptive study of Mewari and Marwari ergative case. I see there are some issues with the presentation.
My name is Usha and I work on Ergativity in a couple of Western Indo-Aryan languages. Today I will present two of the languages that I generally work with. The topic of today's presentation is Ergativity, a descriptive study of Mewari and Marwari ergative case. The objective for today's presentations are a description of ergativity in two closely related Rajasthani languages, Mewari and Marwari. I will try to clarify the status of Mewari ergative as a dependent case and also try to clarify the absence of ergative in Marwari. And the analysis is mostly a feature inheritance theory for ergativity in Western Indo-Aryan languages. I'll begin with the definition. World languages are classified as either nominative accusative or ergative absolutive. Nominative accusative are languages which classify their transitive and intransitive subjects in S together to the exclusion of transitive object. On the other hand, ergative absolutive systems keep their transitive subject and intransitive object together to the exclusion of transitive subject. Here's an example from Dixon. We can see example of Birbal, where in first sentence father returned and second mother saw father, we can see that intransitive subject and transitive object appear with a similar morphology, so there's no case marker over there in comparison to mother in the second example, which is transitive subject, which has an ergative case marker. For today we will take up two Rajasthani languages, Marwari and Mewari. Marwari is actually spoken throughout India mainly because it is a language which belongs to trader community. In fact, the Constitution of India also now recognizes Marwari as an official language. And I will take up Mewari. Mewari is another, it is considered as a dialect of Rajasthani, but as we will see today, there are marked differences between the two languages. There has been historical contact between Marwari and Mewari. However, Mewari has been isolated when it comes to comparison with other languages. Here's a small example from Mewari ergativity. Mewari is a default nominative accusative language. We can see example, John Sita ne dekhego, which means John will see Sita. The subject appears with a nominative case. There is no case marking here. However, the object, it appears with an accusative case marker and the verbal agreement is triggered by the subject, the unmarked subject John. So compare this with the perfective aspect ergative construction, John ne Sita ne milyo, which means John met Sita, and we can see that the subject appears with a ne case marker. The object also appears with a ne case marker are written absolutive here, but it's actually accusative. Because both the subject and object are overtly case marked, the verbal agreement is default third person masculine singular here. Now we have Marwari ergativity. Marwari has a dicey status when it comes to ergative constructions. It's predominantly a nominative accusative language. John Sita ne milela in 5, which means John will meet Sita. The subject appears with a nominative case, so it's unmarked. The object has accusative case marker, and the verbal agreement is triggered by the unmarked subject. John. Compare this with sixth, a perfective construction, John Sita ne dekhi, which means John saw Sita. We can see that the subject still appears without any overt case. Some people say it might be a covert ergative, but it's open to speculation, as I will show in the latter part of the presentation. However, in this case, the verbal agreement is not triggered by the subject, the unmarked subject. It is triggered by the object, even though it is overtly case marked. Here are some questions that I would like to raise in this presentation. What is the nature of ergative case that appears in Mewari? Is ergative different from nominative case, especially when we have Marwari, where both the cases do not have any overt morphology, and how are they different? Third is what triggers ergativity in the perfective aspect, and yes, a huge question about Marwari ergativity. The subject of perfective construction is again unmarked, so what case is it? Is it nominative or ergative? When it comes to ergative case, there are three main speculations in the literature. The first one is that it could be structural case, and anyway, we all know that case has been analyzed by through a lot of analysis. One is structural case, licensed by a functional head as a result of 5-feature agreement between a functional head and a nominal. So for example, nominative case, licensed by the T head. Second is inherent case, licensed by little v in association with external theta role, so it cannot appear on derived subjects. For example, in some languages, ergative case is licensed by little v head. Finally, dependent case, the latest analysis, it's very popular nowadays. Dependent case is licensed configurationally in the presence of another DP within the same case licensing domain. One example is accusative case, which is licensed in the presence of nominative. Why ergative? As in, you would question, why are we studying ergativity here? So here's a small statement, actually very big statement given by two researchers, Johns 1992, Woolford 1999, that ergativity is not a unified phenomenon cross-linguistically, so it doesn't mean one thing happening, so it could be different things happening in different languages. So, for example, ergative is an inherent case assigned by a defective little v in association with external theta role for languages like Walpiri, Hindi, Urdu, Georgian, etc. And you can see a number of researchers abide by it. For some languages like Basque and Chukchi, ergative is a structural case licensed by the T head as a result of 5-feature agreement between the T and subject DP. So, finally, ergative is also considered as a dependent case for languages like Sakha, Chol, assigned in presence of another DP in the object position. So, I will try to analyze what kind of a case is ergative for the two languages that I am taking up in this presentation. I will first try to ascertain if Mewari and Marwari ergative is a structural case. So I will try to use diagnostics to establish 5-feature agreement between an ergative subject DP and T head. So here are some examples: absence of finite T context, so scope constructions and verbal morphology, ergative with non-finite T. So if ergative is a structural case, then it should appear only in finite context. It should not appear in non-finite context. So here we have example 7. मैं देखियो कि मणकी उंदरो पकड़ो, which means I saw that the cat has caught the mouse. This is a Mewari example, and we can see that the embedded clause is a finite context, and we have a cat which appears with an ergative case marker. However, in non-finite context, I saw the cat catching the mouse. We have a non-finite embedded clause, but the embedded subject still doesn't appear with an ergative case. So there's a slight problem though with this diagnostic, that the embedded clause in the non-finite context is not perfective, and in our languages, in the concerned languages, ergative only appears in the perfective construction. So I could not really properly use this diagnostic. Second is Marwari. मैं देखियो कि बिल्ली उंदरों ने पकड़ी. In case of Marwari, we do not have an overt ergative case. Ergativity can only be pointed out when we see that the subject fails to trigger verbal agreement. And we can see that in ninth, the cat, it does trigger verbal agreement. We can't say that it's an ergative case. And in 10th, मैं बिल्ली ने उंदरा पकड़तो देखियो. So again, it's the same problem that we do not have a perfective aspect in the embedded clause. With inverse scope, Anand and Nevins, they say that for the subject to take scope over the object, the argument has to agree with T. So in case of Mewari, कोई औरत हर टाबरा ने पकड़ी ली है, which means some woman was holding every child. We can see that the nominative subject can have surface scope and inverse scope also. In case of in 12th, किसी औरत ने हर टाबरा ने पकड़ा, there cannot be a wide scope. In case of Marwari, unfortunately, this diagnostic did not work. My informants did not utilize wide scope in these constructions. Verbal morphology is a very clear indicator. If we can see subject agreeing with the verb, the TP complex, then we can say that subject triggers verbal. The case of subject is licensed by V or T. So Meri bhoot dekh rahi hi, nominative subject very clearly triggers verbal agreement. Meri ne bhoot dekhyo. Bhoot is masculine, and we can see in 16th the verb shows objects, 5 features. In case of Marwari, again, Meri bhoot ne dekh rahi hai, which means Mary is seeing a ghost. The nominative subject triggers agreement, but not the subject of 18th. So we have seen that Mewari ergative case is not licensed in non-finite contexts, allows only surface scope, and verbal morphology pattern also indicates the absence of agreement between T and subject DP. Therefore, Mewari ergative is non-structural case, and hence it is not like nominative. However, none of the above mentioned diagnostic applies on Marwari. The only exception is presence of verbal agreement with object. So I will elaborate upon it later on. Next, we have inherent case. So I will try to use diagnostics to establish correlation between ergative case and external theta role. So I'll use diagnostics like verbal morphology, unergative constructions, unaccusative constructions, and causatives. So unergative constructions have the only argument which kind of appears in these constructions has an external theta role. So in Mewari, John Mercasio, we can see that the subject of unergative appears with an ergative case. There is a correlation here. In Marwari, John cheat dio and Mary cheat di, the subject triggers verbal agreement. So we're not sure if in case of Marwari, ergative is associated with external theta role. However, not all unergative predicates allow ergative on the subject DP. So John ne chalyo, again, to walk is an unergative construction, and we cannot license an ergative case on the subject. Again, Mary sadak mate chali, which means the girl walked on the road. We do not find absence of subject agreement in Marwari. Finally, unaccusative constructions. Unaccusative, the sole, it's considered as a true intransitive, and the internal argument in this construction, which appears as a sole argument, does not have ergative. John fell from the terrace. So John, we can't have John ne. We can only say John chat u padi gyo. Compare this to Marwari, Meera chat u gir gayi. So again, verbal agreement is very clear, and unaccusative constructions do not have ergative pattern. Causative constructions add an external layer. So the causator appears with external theta role. So mother made John sleep. We can see that in causative constructions, the subject does appear with ne marker. In case of Marwari, ma John ne subayo, the verbal agreement is with the object. So we can say that we do have some, so evidence, we have evidence suggesting that ergative case is definitely not licensed on internal arguments, but however, the correlation between external theta role and ergative case could not be established very clearly. Finally, Ergative as a dependent case. Number of people, including Baker and Vinokurova, they said that ergative is licensed on the higher of two arguments present within a VP. So that is the only condition that we have. Transitive constructions very clearly. John ne Sita ne dekhyo, we have an object. That is why the subject gets an ergative. John Sita ne dekhi, again ergative, at least the marking. So we have a presence of object DP here. And we've already seen that in true intransitives, in unaccusatives, the ergative pattern is totally missing. And in case of in unergative constructions, they are considered as underlying transitive. You can see the paper I've cited here. So some predicates do allow ergative case. Now here's my analysis for dependent case and why do we have ergativity in certain constructions. So I start with a few assumptions. The perfective aspect, which introduces the external DP, is a defective head. This is not a new assumption. A lot of people have already mentioned that. I follow Mahajan's double VP structure to account for the dependent case analysis. The higher V1P has a full set of uninterpretable phi feature, and the VP associated with perfective aspect, the defective head, is the lower V2P. So what happens in the perfective constructions is that the defective V2 head inherits uninterpretable phi features from the V head, and then when it has become phi complete, it can license accusative case of object DP. Due to feature inheritance, V1 head is discharged of its phi feature and it cannot provide an active specifier position to the external argument to move up. So the subject DP gets stranded inside V2P and fails to enter into a phi agreement with T and does not get a nominative case. So in this case, when the subject is stranded within the VP and the subject cannot move out, it gets a configurational dependent ergative case because we have another structurally case mapped object DP down below. In case of Marwari, I assume that we know that Marwari does not overtly case maps its subject DP in perfective aspect, and the verb shows partial phi agreement with the object DP, even in cases where the object is overtly case mapped with accusative case. Marwari has already been discussed by Patel, Gross and Gross 2013. They take examples from Mag here where we can also see, so मैं सीता ने देखी हूँ, which means I have seen Sita, and आप सीता ने देखी हो. So they have this analysis about multiple probe where the subject agrees with T. We can see in example 30th that who, which is B. This is sorry for the schwa here, it's a typo. So the auxiliary here shows agreement in person with the subject, but the object dekhi shows agreement with the object. So we have multiple probe analysis here. Her analysis is that V triggers agreement with the object. Anyway, the probe by little v does not have a person feature, and T triggers agreement with the subject. So that has person feature. So there are also cases of dialectal variation here. Some languages, the language that I was concerned with, did not show auxiliaries. Did not have auxiliaries in the perfective construction, at least the present auxiliary. But the question about Patel, Gross and Gross analysis is the issue of a defective head licensing a structural case. So I assume that maybe through a diachronic change, Marwari happened to have a phi complete little v. So there was no need for feature inheritance. The verb could always trigger agreement with object DP and license an accusative case, and the T would trigger verbal agreement, would trigger agreement with the subject. So Marwari perfective is then equal to imperfective aspect. There is no difference between the two. However, we still find object agreement. So I push this entire issue onto interface issues. So phi agreement between V and object DP is not represented in morphology in imperfective aspect, even though it is always there. The object always gets accusative case in imperfective aspect. However, phi agreement between subject and T is visible morphologically in the default nominative accusative pattern. So this is a possibility that PF interface makes phi agreement between object and V visible in the perfective aspect. Maybe because in perfective aspect, traditionally and also in other languages, we do not have an agreement between subject and T. So this may be an issue of having some relics of an old kind of a pattern that we have. The Marwari is known to be descendant of old Rajasthani, which did possess certain ergative-like constructions, but there is a decay of ergativity. So diachronic variation may have resulted from utilization of a phi complete VP, but the pattern of showing a lower set of phi agreement in the morphology may still remain. So, and my fieldwork did show that there are certain dialects of Marwari which have totally lost the ergative pattern. So this is the analysis. A phi complete VP does not require feature inheritance, and then you can agree with the T. And verbal agreement is just a relic from an earlier stage where object agreement was made visible by PF interface. So in the conclusion, Mewari has both defective VP as well as PF instructions for making object VP agreement visible. Therefore, the subject gets ergative case owing to not being able to move up closer to T, and the dependent case mechanism gets triggered. The PF instruction for VP domain remain the same in Marwari. So Marwari does not possess an ergative case. That is it. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions.
I read in literature that it's impossible to use the same marking in the same sentence for subject and direct object. The sentence is like, I think it's something like language universal, that in the same sentence, and even in the speech of the same individual, usually subject and object are not marked by the same postposition, not marked equally. So how many informants use this construction? John ne sita ne milieu. And again, milna is to meet is intransitive verb actually. It never has ergative construction either in Hindi or in Marwari. I think it doesn't have ergative construction. So is it only in Mewari that this, the verb to meet has ergative construction? And that is one question that's very interesting if it is really a widespread feature, because usually the same marking is not used for different syntactic roles in the same sentence. And I didn't understand one more thing that you said me de kyo in Marwari had the nominative case, and the same construction in Mewari I think had ergative case. Exactly, if I, maybe I missed something, I didn't catch it.
Try to go back to the
If it is easy.
John is Sita.
No, not John, but me. Me the cure. I saw.
Yeah, me actually, yeah. So there are Mewari. I actually during my fieldwork I came across two languages which have ergative and accusative both appearing within their construction. One was Mewari. I consulted 25 informants in Udaipur region. They were within the same area, and I also met 3 speakers of Ahirvati who utilize exactly the same subject and object case morpheme. This kind of dialect is followed in Narnaul area of Haryana. So I consulted quite a lot of people. So there are 2 languages which kind of maybe defy that universal. However, there's a in Mewari, whenever even due to scrambling of our topic, of our focus, if you move the object before the subject loses. So if I have to say only John saw Sita, which means sirf John ne Sita ko dekha. So Mewari people will say sirf John ne, सिर्फ सीता ने John देखियो, which means John only saw Sita. So when you move the object in front, the Mewari people, they kind of lose ergative. So that is some kind of a change which is going on there. But but the Ahirvati dialect of Narnaul still sticks to having the subject and object. They utilize stress, intonational stress for kind of pointing out what is the subject. So yeah, in the field I did find certain examples like that. And may is sorry, this is a typo. Actually, may is
in Mewari, and the same that was in Marwari was nominative, and here was what is the difference?
It's a typo. Actually, it's may versus may. So may is the subject with nominative, and may is subject with ergative. So may versus may. It's the same thing with thu versus the, which is for second person in these languages.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think this is a professional,
Yeah, that should be
professional
some other-
discussion, and some more general questions.
Yeah.
Just a very stupid question. I see that in Mewari there is the same marker for ergative and accusative. How do you distinguish whether is it position or what order or what? Because there is a zero and ne. That's all. Why do you say that there is accusative, nominative, ergative?
Yeah, actually, case syncretism is a big issue with these languages. It's widespread. So I also work on 2 other languages which utilize ne for accusative, ergative, and dative. And after a few papers that I've been reading, one is by Baker and Adlamas, they say that it's just an oblique case. It's still under.
Yeah. Why do you say that there are more than one case? There's only one marker. That's all.
Yeah, I'm still actually working on that issue. But ergative subject, when I tried diagnostics like binding and control, the ergative subject with the name marker, it shows a similarity to nominator, so it is higher up in the structure than the name marked object.
Yeah, but mark is the same.
Marking.
What is the reason to say if the mark is the same? What is the reason to say that there are 2 cases? Just two case system. That's all. Full stop.
Yeah, actually, I'm trying to work on.
It's
Okay,
actually
zero and
three
net.
cases.
Okay, zero and net.
Nominative,
Maybe there's something.
ergative and dative.
Ergative,
Well,
accusative, and dative.
Okay. But here we see zero and net. That's all right. Maybe there are others which are.
Sorry, maybe
not
in
here.
the
Okay.
pronouns it's different. Maybe
Yeah.
pronouns it's
Oh,
different.
but no,
That
even
one is
with
the same.
pronouns, even the pronominal forms are same.
What is the reason to say there are 2?
Yeah, I'm still trying to work on that. I
Okay.
haven't really found a difference between them. Yeah, but in unergative constructions in Mewari, the subject of unergative, it kind of triggers verbal agreement, but not the name-marked object. But only in unergatives, not in other constructions. And these 2 are very, very much restricted. So I'm still trying to work on that.
Yeah, there's one more small question. Is there anyone? Okay, so since we need time to switch the presentations, let's thank the speaker.